The interrogation room was cold and gray. It sat deep inside the Galactic Council's main station, far from any window or natural light. The walls were made of thick metal that blocked all signals. No one could hear what happened inside. No one could send messages out. It was the kind of room where empires learned their deepest secrets and their greatest fears. Commander Vexenar sat alone at a metal table. His forearms were locked in heavy restraints that glowed with a faint blue energy. The restraints were designed for dangerous criminals and war prisoners. They could hold a creature 10 times stronger than him. But Vexenar was not trying to escape. He had no strength left for that dotted skin, normally a bright shade of blue, had turned pale and almost gray. His large compound eyes, which could see in nearly every direction at once, were dull and unfocused. He looked like a creature that had seen something terrible, something that had broken from the inside. The door slid open with a soft hiss. 5 figures entered the room. They were members of the Galactic Council, representatives from the most powerful neutral species in the known galaxy. They had come to hear his story. They had come to understand how the mighty Kovathi Empire had been humiliated by a species that most of them had never even heard of. High Magistrate Telvan walked at the front of the group. He was a Zoari, a tall insectoid being with a hard shell the color of dark copper. His compound eyes were similar to Vexenar's but smaller and sharper. He moved with the careful precision of someone who had spent centuries in positions of power. Behind him came representatives from the Vraxi, the Mandari, the Thalani, and the Kasari. 5 species. 5 witnesses to hear the confession of a defeated commander. Telvan sat down across from Vexenar. The other representatives took their places along the wall, watching in silence. Commander Vexenar of the Korvathi Third Fleet, Telvan said. His voice was calm, but carried the weight of authority. You have been brought before this council to provide testimony regarding the events at the human colony designated New Montana. You will tell us everything that happened. You will not lie. You will not hide information. Do you understand? Vexenar looked up slowly. His eyes met Telvan's for just a moment before dropping again. Yes, he said. His voice was rough and broken, like someone who had been screaming for days. I understand. Good. Telvan placed a small recording device on the table. Let us begin. The Kovathi Empire sent 300 warships to attack a single human colony. Those ships carried over 2 million soldiers. They had the most advanced weapons your species has ever built. They had commanders with centuries of experience. He paused, letting the silence fill the room. 6 hours later, only 17 of those ships escaped. Less than 50,000 of your soldiers survived. The rest were killed, captured, or missing. The colony you attacked is still in human hands. The humans lost fewer than 2,000 soldiers. Telvan leaned forward. Explain to this council how that is possible. Vexenar was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. You want me to explain the humans? Yes. Then you are asking me to explain a nightmare. Vexenar lifted his head. For the first time, the council representatives could see the full depth of fear in his eyes. It was not the fear of punishment or death. It was something deeper. It was the fear of someone who had looked into the dark and seen something looking back at him. I will tell you what happened. I will tell you everything. But I want you to understand something first. He looked at each representative in turn. The Kovathi Empire has existed for 12,000 years. We have conquered over 400 species. We have fought wars across 100 sectors of space. We have never lost. Not once. Not until we met the humans. The Vraxi representative, a large reptilian being covered in green scales, shifted uncomfortably. Surely you exaggerate. The humans are a young species. They have only been traveling among the stars for a few of their generations. Their technology is inferior to most spacefaring civilizations. Yes, Vexenar agreed. Their technology is inferior. Their ships are slower. Their weapons are weaker. Their bodies are soft and fragile. They need air and water and food. They cannot survive in vacuum or extreme temperatures. By every measure we use to judge a species, they should be easy prey. He laughed. It was a terrible sound, empty of any real humor. That is what we thought. That is what everyone thinks when they first learn about humans. They look at the data and they see a weak species on a small planet in an unremarkable corner of the galaxy. They see creatures that should be grateful to be conquered. Vexenar's voice dropped lower. But the data lies. The numbers lie. Everything we thought we knew about humans was wrong. And by the time we understood the truth, it was too late. Far too late. High Magistrate Telvin exchanged glances with the other representatives. Then tell us the truth, Commander. What are humans really? Vexenar closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were filled with a haunted darkness. Humans are survivors. Not like the Mindari, who survive through numbers, or the Thawani, who survive through adaptation. Humans survive through something else entirely. Something that should not exist in a rational universe. He pulled against his restraints, not to escape, but as if he needed to feel something solid and real. Their home world tried to kill them. It is a planet of extreme temperatures, violent weather, deadly predators, poisonous plants, and constant natural disasters. Any other species would have died out or evolved to avoid conflict. Humans did neither. They fought back against their own planet. They conquered it. They bent it to their will through nothing but stubbornness and rage. The Khazari representative, a small being with silver skin and large dark eyes, spoke up. Many species come from difficult worlds. It does not make them invincible. No, Vexenar agreed. It does not. But humans are different. Other species that come from death worlds are cautious. They learn to fear their environment. They developed instincts for avoiding danger. They run when threatened. They hide when outmatched. He shook his head slowly. Humans learned the opposite lesson. They learned that running does not work. They learned that hiding only delays death. So instead, they learned to attack. They learned that the best way to survive a dangerous universe is to become the most dangerous thing in it. The room was completely silent now. Every representative was watching Vexenar with growing unease. When we arrived at New Montana with 300 ships, he continued, we expected fear. We expected panic. We expected the humans to see our fleet and understand that resistance was pointless. We expected them to surrender or die quickly. Vexenar's pale blue skin seemed to grow even lighter. Instead, they looked at our fleet and saw an opportunity. They saw 300 ships full of enemies to kill. They saw a challenge to overcome. And they smiled. He met Telvan's eyes directly. That is when I first felt afraid. Not when the battle started. Not when our ships began to burn. It was that moment, when I saw a human commander look at certain death and smile, that I understood we had made a terrible mistake. High Magistrate Telvan sat back slowly. The recording device hummed softly on the table between them. Continue, he said quietly. Tell us about the battle. Vexenar nodded. His forearms hung limp in their restraints. I will tell you everything. And when I am finished, you will understand why the Korvathi Empire is already dead. We just do not know it yet. Vexenar took a deep breath and began to tell the story of how the invasion started. His voice was steady now, but there was a trembling underneath that none of the council representatives missed. The Korvathi had spent 2 full cycles studying humans before the attack. They had sent spy drones to watch human colonies. They had captured and examined human technology, They had even taken a few human prisoners from remote outposts and studied their bodies, their minds, and their behavior. Everything they learned told them the same thing. Humans were weak, their ships were slow and poorly armored compared to Korvathi vessels. Their weapons used simple plasma and kinetic designs that had been outdated for centuries in most advanced civilizations. Their bodies required constant maintenance. They needed to breathe a specific mixture of gases. They needed to drink water every few hours. They needed to eat regularly. They needed to sleep for nearly a third of each day's cycle. A Korvathi soldier could go without sleep for 10 days. They could survive on minimal water for weeks. They could breathe in a dozen different atmospheric conditions. Their shells were hard enough to stop small weapons fired by every measure. The Korvathi were superior. Admiral Zethkin had led the fleet. He was one of the greatest military commanders in Korvathi history. He had conquered 37 worlds. He had never lost a battle. He looked at the intelligence reports on humans and saw an easy victory. "We will take their colony in one rotation," he had told his officers. "We will capture their people and add them to our labor pools. They will learn to serve the Korvathi Empire as all inferior species must." The fleet arrived at New Montana on a clear day. The colony sat on a planet with blue skies, green forests, and wide oceans. It looked peaceful, beautiful, even. From orbit, the Korvathi could see small human cities scattered across the main continent. They could see farms and roads and all the signs of a young civilization just beginning to grow. There were only 4 human ships defending the colony. 4 small vessels against 300 Korvathi warships. It was not even worth calling a battle. Admiral Zethkin ordered the fleet to take formation around the planet. They surrounded it completely, blocking any escape. Then he opened a communication channel to the surface. "Humans of New Montana," he said, his voice booming across every frequency. "I am Admiral Zethkan of the Korvathi Empire. You are surrounded by the greatest military force this region has ever seen. You have no hope of victory. You have no hope of escape. Surrender now and your people will be spared. Resist and you will all die." He expected fear. He expected begging. He expected the humans to immediately start negotiations for their survival. Instead, the communication screen flickered and a human appeared. She was a small creature by Korvathi standards. Her body was compact and soft-looking, covered in strange fabric that the Korvathi recognized as some kind of uniform. Her skin was pale brown. Her hair was dark and pulled back from her face. She looked young by human standards, perhaps 30 of their years. She stood on what appeared to be the bridge of one of the tiny human defense ships. Behind her, other humans moved calmly at their stations. None of them looked panicked. None of them looked afraid. "This is Commander Amy Lawson of the New Montana Colonial Defense Force," she said. Her voice was calm and clear, almost pleasant. "Thank you for your message, Admiral. I have one in return." She paused and looked directly into the communication screen. "Leave, now. This is your only warning." For a moment, the entire Korvathi bridge was silent. Then Admiral Zethkin began to laugh. His officers joined him. The sound of their harsh, clicking laughter filled the ship. "Did you hear that?" Zethkan said when he could speak again. "The human threatens us. One small creature on one small ship threatens the Korvathi Empire." He leaned toward the screen, still laughing. "Little human, look around you. Look at what surrounds your pathetic world. 300 ships. Over 2 million soldiers. We could burn your entire planet to ash without ever landing a single troop. You have nothing. You are nothing. And you dare to threaten me?" Commander Lawson did not react to his laughter. Her expression did not change. She simply waited until he was finished speaking. "I heard you," she said calmly. and I understand that you have more ships and more soldiers than we do. The numbers are not in our favor. But I am still giving you this warning, Admiral. Leave now, or every single one of your soldiers will die here. This is not a threat. This is simply a fact." Vexinar paused in his story. The council representatives were watching him with intense focus. "I was on the bridge when that communication happened," he said. "I was a junior commander at the time, in charge of a small squadron. I remember looking at that human female on the screen and feeling something strange. Something I could not explain." "What did you feel?" High Magistrate Telvan asked. "I felt that she was telling the truth." Vexinar shook his head slowly. It made no sense. The numbers were completely on our side. There was no logical way the humans could win. But when I looked at her face and heard her voice, some part of me believed her. Some part of me wanted to tell the Admiral to turn around and go home. He let out a long breath. I said nothing, of course. I was young and afraid of looking foolish. But I remember thinking that there was something wrong about this situation. Something we were not seeing. The Vraxi representative leaned forward. "But your Admiral did not share these concerns?" "No. Admiral Zethkin saw only what the data showed him. He saw a weak species defending an isolated colony. He saw an easy victory that would bring glory to his name." Vexinar's voice grew bitter. He ended the communication with Commander Lawson and ordered the invasion to begin. The first wave consisted of 200 landing ships carrying nearly 50,000 Korvati soldiers. They descended on the colony in perfect formation. The human defense ships tried to stop them, but were quickly outmaneuvered. The Korvati ships were faster and more numerous. The human vessels were pushed back toward the planet's atmosphere. "We thought we had already won," Vexinar said. "Our landing ships were touching down all across the colony. Our soldiers were deploying in perfect order. The humans had no army to speak of. No real defenses. We expected to take the entire planet within a few hours." He fell silent for a moment. Then the dying started. The first reports came from a landing zone near one of the human cities. A Korvati battalion of 800 soldiers had secured a position on the edge of a forest. They were preparing to advance on a nearby settlement when they came under attack. The attacking force was 40 humans. Just 40. The Korvati battalion commander sent a message saying that he would eliminate the threat and continue the advance. He expected the engagement to last a few minutes, at most. An hour later, the entire battalion was gone. Dead. Every single soldier. "We did not believe the reports at first," Vexinar said. 800 Korvati soldiers killed by 40 humans? It was impossible. Our commanders assumed there must be some mistake. Perhaps there were hidden weapons. Perhaps reinforcements had arrived. Perhaps the battalion had encountered some kind of native predator. He looked up at the council. "So we sent another battalion to investigate. 1,000 soldiers this time, with air support and heavy weapons. We were certain they would find the truth and eliminate whatever threat had destroyed the first group." Vexinar's voice dropped to a whisper. "They lasted 2 hours. Then they were gone too. And the humans were still there, waiting for us to send more." High Magistrate Telvan sat very still. "How is that possible?" "That is the question we asked ourselves," Vexinar replied. "That is the question we could not answer. How could a small group of soft, fragile humans destroy our soldiers so completely? They had no special weapons, no advanced technology, no numerical advantage." He shook his head slowly. "It took us far too long to understand the answer. The humans did not win because of their weapons or their numbers. They won because of something inside them. Something that made them fight in ways we had never seen before. Something that made them impossible to predict and almost impossible to stop." Vexinar met the eyes of each council representative in turn. They won because they were not afraid to die. And that changed everything. The council chamber remained silent as Vexenar continued his testimony. The recording device on the table hummed softly, capturing every word. None of the representatives moved. They barely seemed to breathe. Vexenar closed his compound eyes for a moment, as if gathering the strength to continue. When he opened them again, they held a distant look. The look of someone seeing memories they wished they could forget. The humans fought like nothing we had ever encountered, he said quietly. We have battled many species across the galaxy. The Zillario logical and withdraw when the odds turn against them. The Vraxi fight with honor and accept defeat when they are clearly beaten. The Mendari attack in swarms but scatter when their command structure is broken. Every species has patterns. Every species has weaknesses that can be exploited. He shook his head slowly. Humans have no pattern. They have no predictable behavior. They do not retreat when outnumbered. They do not surrender when wounded. They do not stop fighting until they are physically unable to continue. And even then, sometimes they keep going. The first detailed reports came from a Kovathi unit that had engaged a small human force in a dense forest region. The unit commander, an experienced officer named Kethvan, had kept detailed notes of the engagement. Those notes survived only because he transmitted them continuously throughout the battle. He did not survive to deliver them in person. A human sergeant named Jake Morrison had led a unit of just 40 soldiers against Kethvan's battalion. The Kovathi had expected the humans to take defensive positions and try to hold them as long as possible before retreating or dying. Instead, Morrison attacked thought his unit hit the Kovathi from 3 different directions at once. The humans had somehow spread themselves through the forest without being detected. They used the terrain in ways that seemed impossible. They climbed trees and fired from above. They hid in spaces too small for their bodies, compressing themselves into holes and gaps that should not have fit them. They moved through the underbrush without making a sound. The Kovathi had superior numbers, superior weapons, and superior armor. None of it mattered. The humans targeted officers first. They seemed to know exactly which Kovathi were giving orders, and those Kovathi died within the first minutes of combat. Without leadership, the battalion fell into confusion, and the humans exploited that confusion perfectly. One incident stands out in my memory, Vexenar said. A young human soldier named Chris Dunbar was hit by a plasma bolt. The shot went through his shoulder and destroyed most of the muscle and bone on that side of his body. By any reasonable measure, he should have been incapacitated. He should have fallen to the ground screaming in pain. Vexenar's voice grew quieter. Instead, he kept fighting. He propped his weapon against a tree trunk, aimed with his remaining good arm, and continued firing for another 20 minutes. His companions eventually pulled him back to safety and treated his wounds. He was back in combat 2 days later with a medical device holding his shoulder together. The Gazari representative spoke up, her silver skin shimmering in the cold light. Surely that is impossible. The pain alone would prevent any creature from functioning. That is what we believed, Vexenar agreed. That is what our medical experts told us. But we recovered video recordings from Kovathi soldiers who fell in that battle. We saw it happen. We saw humans take injuries that should have killed them and continue fighting as if nothing had happened. He paused for a moment. We later learned that humans have a biological response they call adrenaline. When threatened, their bodies flood with chemicals that suppress pain, increase strength, and sharpen focus. They can temporarily push their bodies far beyond normal limits. And humans have learned to trigger this response deliberately. They train themselves to enter this state whenever they fight. The more the Kovathi studied the battle recordings, the more terrifying they became. Humans fought in silence when they needed to, communicating through hand signals and subtle movements. They shared information constantly, warning each other of threats and coordinating their attacks. When one human fell, the others would recover their weapon and ammunition and keep fighting. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was left behind. But the most disturbing thing was their eyes. I will never forget the first time I saw a human face in combat, Vexenar said. We had captured a recording from a soldier's helmet camera. He was engaging a human female at close range. She was small, probably young by their standards. She had no armor. Her weapon was nearly out of power. She was bleeding from multiple wounds. He swallowed hard, and she was smiling. Not a smile of joy or happiness. It was something else entirely. Her eyes were focused and calm. There was no fear in them. No panic, no desperation. She had already accepted that she might die, and that acceptance had freed her from doubt. She was not fighting to survive. She was fighting to take as many Kovathi with her as possible. The Kovathi soldier in the recording had hesitated when he saw that smile. Just for a moment. Just long enough for the human female to close the distance between them and drive a blade into the gap in his armor. The recording ended there. We found his body later, Vexenar continued, and the bodies of 3 other Kovathi soldiers. The human female had killed them all before succumbing to her wounds. 4 of our soldiers, killed by 1 wounded human with an empty weapon and a knife. Sergeant Morrison's unit held their position for 6 hours. During that time, they killed over 700 Kovathi soldiers. They lost only 12 of their own. And when they finally ran low on ammunition, they did not retreat. They attacked again. They used captured Kovathi weapons. They used improvised explosives made from battlefield debris. They used rocks and blades and their bare hands. They kept fighting until reinforcements arrived from another human unit. Then they melted back into the forest and disappeared. The Kovathi never found Sergeant Morrison. He continued to lead attacks throughout the entire battle. By the end, his original unit of 40 had grown to over 200 as other scattered human defenders joined him. They caused more casualties than any other single human force. We called him the Ghost, Vexenar admitted. Our soldiers began to fear his name. They would refuse to advance into areas where he had been spotted. Veterans who had fought 100 battles became afraid of 1 human. High Magistrate Telvin spoke slowly. This is difficult to believe, Commander. The Kovathi are among the finest warriors in the known galaxy. How could 1 human cause such fear? Vexenar looked at him with empty eyes. Because he could not be killed. We sent assassination teams after him. They all died. We called in orbital strikes on his suspected positions. He was never there. We offered rewards for his capture. No one collected them. He was always 1 step ahead, always appearing where we least expected him, always leaving dead Kovathi in his wake. He leaned forward against his restraints. But Morrison was just 1 human. There were thousands of them on New Montana, and every single one of them fought the same way, with the same determination, the same refusal to surrender, the same willingness to die as long as they could take enemies with them. Vexenar's voice broke slightly. Do you understand what that means? It means there was no breaking point, no moment when human morale collapsed. No situation where they accepted defeat. Every Kovathi soldier who landed on New Montana had to fight to the death, because the humans would accept nothing less. He sat back, exhausted. We had never faced anything like it. We had no strategy to counter it. We had no training for it. All we could do was keep sending more soldiers to die, and hope that eventually the humans would run out of bodies before we did. He laughed bitterly. We were wrong about that too. The council chamber seemed to grow colder as Vexenar continued his testimony. The representatives had stopped shifting in their seats. They had stopped looking at each other. All of their attention was fixed on the pale Kovathi commander and the terrible story he was telling. After 6 hours of ground combat, we had lost over 100,000 soldiers, Vexnar said. His voice was flat and empty. The humans had lost perhaps 2,000. Our commanders could not understand it. Our strategies were sound. Our weapons were superior. Our numbers should have been overwhelming. He paused. Admiral Zefkan decided that the problem was the terrain. The humans were using the forests and mountains and cities to their advantage. So he ordered an orbital bombardment of all human defensive positions. The Vraxi representative stirred. Orbital bombardment against ground targets? That seems excessive for such a small force. It was an act of desperation, Vexnar admitted. The Admiral was afraid, though he would never admit it. He had never faced an enemy that would not break. He had never lost to so many soldiers to so few enemies. His reputation was being destroyed with every hour that passed. The Kovathi fleet moved into bombardment position, targeting computers locked onto human strongholds across the continent. Weapons charged and prepared to fire. The plan was simple. Turn every human position into a crater. Then land fresh troops on the scorched ground and claim victory. But the humans had one more surprise waiting. The colonial defense ship called the Relentless had been badly damaged early in the battle. 2 of its 4 engines were destroyed. Its shields were gone. Its hull was cracked in multiple places. It should have retreated to a safe distance to protect its surviving crew. Instead, it began accelerating directly toward the Kovathi flagship. Lieutenant Commander Ben Harper was in command. His pilot was a woman named Kate Sullivan. Both of them had been fighting since the first moment of the invasion. Both of them had watched friends die. Both of them knew that the orbital bombardment would kill the defenders on the ground. They made a choice. At first, we did not understand what the human ship was doing, Vexnar said. It was too damaged to threaten us. Its weapons were nearly depleted. We assumed it was trying to retreat and had simply gotten turned around in the confusion of battle. He shook his head slowly. Then we saw its course. It was heading directly for the flagship. Not just moving in that general direction. It was on a precise collision course, accelerating at maximum speed. The Kovathi opened fire. Dozens of ships poured energy into the approaching vessel. But Kate Sullivan flew like nothing the Kovathi had ever seen. She wove through the defensive fire with movements that should have torn the ship apart. She used debris from destroyed vessels as cover. She pushed the damaged engines beyond every safety limit. I watched it happen from my own ship, Vexnar said quietly. I watched that human pilot dodge fire from 30 vessels. She was flying a crippled ship with half her systems offline, and she was outmaneuvering our best pilots. It was impossible. It should not have been possible. But she did it. The Relentless struck the flagship at full speed. The impact hit the main reactor housing, exactly where it would cause the most damage. The explosion was visible from orbit. Admiral Zefkan died instantly. His entire bridge crew died with him. The flagship broke apart into 3 separate pieces, each one spinning away into space. And the explosion was so powerful that 11 other Kovathi ships were caught in the blast radius. 12 ships destroyed. By one crippled human vessel? 300 humans were aboard the Relentless, Vexnar said. 300 humans chose to die so they could kill one admiral and destroy 12 ships. And when we reviewed their final communications afterward, do you know what we heard? His voice dropped to barely a whisper. They were singing. All of them. As they flew towards certain death, they were singing some kind of human war song. Their voices were steady. There was no fear, no regret. They sounded almost happy. The Mendari representative, a small creature with multiple tentacles, made a sound of disbelief. That is madness. No rational species would do such a thing. You are correct, Vexenar agreed. It is madness. But the humans have a different word for it. They call it sacrifice. And it is one of their most sacred concepts. He looked at the Mendari with haunted eyes. Humans believe that dying for others is noble. They believe that giving your life to protect your people is the highest possible honor. They teach this to their children. They celebrate it in their stories and songs. They have been doing this for thousands of years, since before they ever left their home world. Vexenar's voice grew more intense. Do you understand what that means? It means that every human soldier we face is ready to die. Not just willing to die if necessary. Ready. Prepared. Looking forward to the opportunity to give their life for something they love. They do not fear death. They embrace it as the ultimate expression of their values. The council chamber was completely silent. When the flagship exploded, something broke in the Karvathi fleet. Vexenar continued. The chain of command collapsed. Officers began arguing over who was in charge. Ships started retreating without orders. Panic spread through our communications channels like a disease. He paused, and the humans noticed immediately. Commander Amy Lawson, who had given that first calm warning at the start of the battle, was still alive. Her ship had taken heavy damage but remained functional. She had been coordinating the ground defense from orbit, watching the bombardment preparations with growing desperation. When the flagship exploded, she saw her chance. The humans should have used that moment to retreat, Vexenar said. They were exhausted. Their forces were depleted. They had been fighting for hours against overwhelming odds. A rational commander would have pulled back, regrouped, and waited for reinforcements. He almost laughed. Commander Lawson attacked. The 3 surviving human defense ships charged directly at the Karvathi fleet. Behind them, human ground forces pushed out of their defensive positions and began hunting the Karvathi troops who had landed. The entire human army, such as it was, went on the offensive. They were outnumbered in space by nearly 100 to 1. On the ground, the odds were even worse. None of that mattered to them. I remember the moment when I realized we had lost, Vexenar said softly. It was not when the flagship exploded. It was not when our retreat began. It was when I saw those 3 tiny human ships flying toward our fleet, and I understood that they were not trying to survive. They were trying to hurt us as much as possible before they died. He met High Magistrate Telvan's eyes. At that moment, I knew that we could not win. Not this battle. Not any battle against the humans. Because they were willing to pay a price that we could not match. They were willing to sacrifice everything, and we were not. The battle turned into a rout. Karvathi ships fled in all directions. Some collided with each other in the chaos. Some were caught by human weapons as they tried to escape. Some were boarded by human marines who had launched themselves across space in tiny pods, accepting the near certainty of death for the chance to capture enemy vessels. Vexenar himself had tried to rally his squadron. He had ordered them to hold position and provide cover for the retreating fleet. But when he saw a human boarding pod approaching his own ship, he had panicked. He had fled to an escape pod and ejected himself into space. The humans found him drifting hours later. They pulled him out of the pod, treated his injuries, and took him prisoner. They were calm and professional, almost kind. That kindness was somehow more terrifying than anything else. I asked one of the human guards why they were treating me so well, Vexenar said. He looked at me and said something I will never forget. He closed his eyes. He said, "We are not monsters. We only fight because we have to. But when the fighting is done, we remember how to be human again. That is what makes us different from those who start wars. And that is why we always win in the end." Vexenar opened his eyes. That guard's name was Sam Porter. He had lost his brother in the battle just hours before. And still, he showed me mercy. He sat back in his restraints. That is what I cannot stop thinking about. The humans are capable of incredible violence, but they are also capable of incredible compassion. They can switch between the two almost instantly, and somehow that makes them even more dangerous. High Magistrate Telvin sat in silence for a long moment after Vexenar finished speaking. The other council representatives were equally still. The recording device hummed quietly on the table, capturing the heavy pause that filled the interrogation room. Finally, Telvan spoke. And after the retreat? What happened to the surviving Korvathi forces? Vexenar let out a long, shuddering breath. His pale blue skin seemed almost gray now, drained of all color and life. The humans allowed the survivors to leave, he said. They did not pursue us beyond the edge of their system. They did not try to capture more prisoners. They simply let the 17 remaining ships go. The Thalani representative, a tall being with smooth gray skin and 3 eyes, tilted his head in confusion. Why would they show such mercy? By your own account, your forces had invaded their world and tried to enslave or kill their people. That is exactly the question I asked myself, Vexenar replied. At first, I thought it was weakness. Perhaps the humans were too tired to continue fighting. Perhaps they had taken more casualties than we realized and needed to recover. He shook his head slowly. But then I understood the truth. The humans let us go because they wanted us to go home. They wanted us to tell everyone what had happened. They wanted the Korvathi Empire and every other species in the galaxy to know what happens when you attack human territory. Vex. Nar leaned forward against his restraints. The humans did not show us mercy out of kindness. They showed us mercy so that we could serve as a warning to others. Every survivor of that battle is now a living message. And the message is simple. Do not attack the humans. Do not threaten their people. Do not give them a reason to come for you. The council chamber fell silent again. Every representative was processing the implications of what they had heard. High Magistrate Telvan finally spoke. You mentioned earlier that the Korvathi Empire is already dead. Explain what you meant by that. Vexenar closed his compound eyes for a moment. When he opened them, they were filled with a terrible certainty. The Empire has existed for 12,000 years, he said. We have built our entire civilization on the principle of military strength. We conquer others. We take what we want. We have never faced a species that could truly challenge us. He paused. But now we have. And everything has changed. The news of the disaster at New Montana had already spread throughout the Empire. Soldiers who had heard the stories were afraid. Officers who had studied the battle reports were having trouble sleeping. The Emperor himself had demanded explanations that no one could provide. Our military is shaken, Vexenar continued. Our people are scared. For the first time in our history, we have encountered an enemy that we cannot beat through superior force. And that is just the beginning of our problems. He looked at each council representative in turn. The humans will come for us. Not immediately. They are patient. They will wait until they are ready. They will build more ships. They will train more soldiers. They will study our technology and find ways to counter it. And then, when they are fully prepared, they will strike. The Khazari representative spoke up, her silver skin catching the light. Surely you can negotiate peace. If the humans are capable of mercy, as you described, then they must be capable of forgiveness as well. Vexenar laughed bitterly. You do not understand humans. They can forgive personal insults. They can forgive accidents and misunderstandings. But they never forgive those who threaten their families. They never forgive those who try to harm their children. His voice dropped lower. We invaded their world. We tried to enslave their people. We killed their sons and daughters. Do you think they will ever forget that? Do you think they will ever feel safe while the Kovathi Empire still exists? He sat back. No, the humans will come. And when they do, they will not stop until our empire is destroyed. Not out of cruelty or revenge, but out of simple survival. We have shown them that we are a threat, and humans do not tolerate threats to their people. High Magistrate Telvin exchanged glances with the other council representatives. Finally, he spoke. Then what do you suggest we do, Commander? The council has no quarrel with the humans. We have had no contact with them at all until now. Vexnar looked at him with desperate eyes. That is exactly why I am telling you all of this. You need to contact the humans immediately. You need to make peace with them before it is too late. You need to show them that you are not a threat, that you never will be a threat, and that you want nothing but friendship and cooperation. He gestured with his four bound arms. I have confessed everything. I have told you what humans are capable of. I have told you how they fight and why they cannot be defeated through force. Use this information. Learn from our mistakes. Do not let your species fall the way the Kovathi will fall. The Vraxi representative shifted uneasily. You speak as if the destruction of your empire is certain. It is, Vexnar said simply. Maybe not tomorrow. Maybe not for many cycles. But eventually, the humans will decide that the Kovathi are too dangerous to leave alone. And when that day comes, nothing we do will save us. We sealed our fate the moment we attacked New Montana. He closed his eyes. My confession is complete. I have told you everything I know about humans. I have explained why they are the most dangerous species in the galaxy. I have warned you of the consequences of opposing them. When he opened his eyes again, they were filled with a strange peace. The look of someone who has finally set down a burden they have been carrying too long. Now the choice is yours. You can ignore my warning and continue as you always have. You can treat humans as just another species to be studied and analyzed. You can convince yourselves that what happened to the Kovathi was a unique situation that could never be repeated. He shook his head. Or you can listen. You can approach the humans with respect and humility. You can offer them trade and friendship and cooperation. You can show them that not every species in the galaxy is a threat. Vexnar leaned forward one final time. I have seen what humans do to their enemies. I have watched them destroy an invasion fleet that should have been unstoppable. I have heard them singing as they flew to their deaths. I have looked into their eyes and seen something that should not exist in a rational universe. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. But I have also seen them show mercy. I have seen them treat prisoners with kindness. I have heard them speak of peace and hope and building a better future. The humans are capable of being the greatest friends or the greatest enemies any species could have. It all depends on how you approach them. High Magistrate Telvin stood slowly. The other council representatives rose with him. The interrogation was over. The council will consider your testimony, Telvin said formally. You will remain in custody until we have reached a decision regarding your fate and the fate of the Kovathi prisoners. Vexnar nodded. He no longer seemed afraid. He had done what he set out to do. He had delivered his warning. Whatever happened next was out of his hands. As the council representatives moved toward the door, Telvin paused and looked back. One final question, Commander. If you could go back and change one thing about this entire situation, what would it be? Vexnar was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice soft and filled with regret. I would have told Admiral Zethkan to listen to Commander Lawson. She gave us a chance to leave. She warned us what would happen if we stayed. We laughed at her. We thought she was weak and foolish. He shook his head slowly. We were the fools. And now the entire Korvathi Empire will pay the price for our arrogance. High Magistrate Telvin turned to his aide as they walked through the corridor outside the interrogation room. Send a diplomatic envoy to Earth. Immediately. Make certain they understand that we come in peace. Make absolutely certain they know we are not a threat. The aide nodded and hurried away. Telvan looked out a nearby window at the stars. Somewhere out there, in a small corner of the galaxy, a species called humanity was building ships and training soldiers and preparing for whatever challenges the future might bring. He hoped, with all of his being, that the Council would never give them a reason to use those ships and soldiers against his people. Because if the Korvathi commander's confession was even partially true, then the galaxy had just become a much more dangerous place, and humanity was at the center of it all.